I have a tea because fall. Okay, welcome back to another video. So for those of you who are new here and don't know me and don't follow me on Instagram, you should. But I am Jess. I am a full-time boudoir photographer here in Ontario, Canada. And I'm giving you some advice for beginner photographers in this video. I am so excited for this one. This is one that gets requested often, and I also get asked questions like this in my DMs on Instagram often. So I figured it was finally time to sit down and make a video, answer all your questions. I popped a question box up on Instagram. You can follow my Instagram, I'll pop it up on the screen over here. And then you can be included next time I do some kind of Q&A like this one. So the first question I got is how I got started. Now, this was kind of like a broad question, like how I got started in photography. So back in 2012 is when I got my first DSLR camera. It was a Canon T3i. I was stoked about it because I believe it came out in 2011. And I just shot from there. And I've also been a Canon girl since then. I get a lot of questions about what gear I use. Canon, always been Canon since that moment. Before that, I was using a family friend's old Fujifilm camera, and it was this like big chunky, I don't even remember the name or model, otherwise I'd pop a picture up. It was so big and so chunky, and then it broke, so then I got the T3i for Christmas, just with the kit lens that came on it. And it was back in the Tumblr days. Tumblr was really popular back in like 2012, 13, 14. And so that's the main reason I wanted this camera, was to take artsy pictures of my vans and post them on Tumblr and get all the reblogs and whatever. I was really big into Tumblr. But before that, I was shooting with like point and shoot cameras with my friends. We were just doing like profile pictures for Facebook. We were doing the most dumb photo shoots. I'm gonna try to find some and I'll pop some of the pictures we used to take up on the screen here. And that's literally all we used to do. Like, we used to hang out with the whole purpose of that. So that's kind of where photography started for me. And then eventually it kind of branched into wanting to work with like clients instead of just taking pictures of like things for Tumblr. And I shot everything at the beginning. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Anything I could get, I would take it. Anything that anybody wanted me to shoot, I would do it. I did stuff for business, I did product photos, I did families, I did a backyard wedding reception once. What else? Anything under the sun, you name it, I've probably shot it. You know, children, which I definitely don't shoot now. So second part to that question about how I got started was how I built a clientele. And the biggest thing, I think it kind of goes across the board with the service industry, is word of mouth is everything. It is everything. It is what is going to skyrocket your business. So for me, it was shooting whoever I could, however I could, whatever I could. It's hard getting started, and a lot of the common questions or common concern I get from a beginner photographer is, how do I get people to book me? And the biggest thing is, like, if people don't know who you are or haven't heard of you, they're probably not gonna book with you. So word of mouth is huge that way. So the beginning steps to building a clientele is definitely just shooting as much as you can. Steal your friends, steal your family. Post model calls if you have an Instagram. And I know, like, when you start a photography Instagram, you might only have a couple hundred followers, but that's still a lot of people. Post some free shoots, or go on any other Instagram account or social media account you have and just shoot everything. It'll in turn help you build relationships with people, and then they'll know who you are. You'll learn what you like while you're doing that if you just shoot everything, because it took me years before I figured out that boudoir was my niche and what I wanted to specialize in. And that will also help you get practice, because that's a really big thing as well, is practice, practice, practice. And then eventually, you know, people will know you and you'll have some work as well to show people. And that's a huge thing as well with building clients. You want to have something for them to look at. And this is gonna go in a little bit of a tangent, but you want to have something that clients can look at outside of social media. Social media is not a valid portfolio. Get a website. If you're watching this and you're wondering, how the heck can I be a photographer? Once you actually start shooting, you need to get a website, and you need to get like an actual website, not a .wix site. I find that looks, don't take this the wrong way, I'm being as genuine as I can here, it looks unprofessional. I would say that's one of the things that you should do really, really early on. It's so important, because if you think about it, you run into someone, you're like, oh, I do photography, check my stuff out on Instagram, and they don't have Instagram. well then where are they gonna go? You know what I mean? So get a website, buy a domain name. They're not super expensive. And then whether you do it through Wix or Squarespace or, you know, whatever hosting platform you choose, don't do the whatever photography.wixsite.com or .squarespace.com. Like, buy a domain and have the website be like yourbusinessname.com, period. Okay, that went off a little bit of a tangent, but that's gonna make you look a little bit more professional and give you a great space for people to view your work. Best gear for beginners. The biggest thing I wanna say with this one is you do not, I repeat, do not need the most expensive gear to be a photographer. I have seen images from really old cameras look better than images from the top of the line cameras, and the only difference being the person with the, you know, older camera knows how to use their camera, and the person with the more professional camera doesn't know what they're doing. So the biggest thing is learning how to shoot on manual. That is the like bread and butter of being a photographer. If you do not know how to shoot on manual, you are going to run into lots of frustrations down the road, not being able to, you know, control the way your images look, because manual mode is really gonna allow you to do that. And I believe that's a question I got, so I will dive into that a little bit later in the video. I started, like I said, with the T3i back in 2012 with the kit lens. It taught me a lot, and I learned on that camera for years before I ended up upgrading to a better camera, and then upgrading, and now I am where I am today with my gear. But you do not, I repeat, let me say it louder for the people in the back, you do not need the most expensive gear. I would say if your budget allows, go for a full frame camera, just because if you do end up taking this further into a professional career, you're gonna want a full frame camera as opposed to a crop sensor camera. That being said, it's a great camera to learn on. The main thing I would say is get a camera that shoots on manual. But I wouldn't say that there is a specific camera or a specific lens that I would recommend for a beginner. Stick within your budget and just get something that you can learn on, and that's the first step.
Okay, editing Jess here real quick. It's more about knowing how to use the gear than the gear itself is mainly my point there when I compared someone who doesn't know how to use a super high-end camera to somebody who does know how to use maybe a more budget-friendly camera. That's mainly what I was getting at, is that the gear doesn't make the photographer, it's you knowing how to use the equipment. Like, the equipment can only do so much. So it's less about the gear and more about learning how to use the gear.
First page, donezo. The next one a question I got is, how do you budget and price yourself when you're starting out? And this is a really big, really common question among beginner photographers. If you're like just starting out, like you've never had a paying client, I wouldn't worry too much about what you're charging and how to price yourself. I would say start shooting people for free. Reach out to local businesses and, you know, see if you want to collab that way. They get the photos, and all they have to do when they share them is tag you, get your family and friends, just like really build a portfolio and give yourself some knowledge under your belt before you start worrying about pricing, is my advice. Once you do get into like starting to take paying clients, a really good thing to do is figure out your cost of doing business. So what subscriptions do you pay for? Like, if you use Lightroom, like that costs money. If you use an email, what the heck would that be called? An email marketing software, or a client management software, or an invoicing software, or a QuickBooks, something like that. Factor all that cost in and know your monthly cost of doing business. And then you can kind of go figure out your pricing from there with how many shoots a month you need to do to cover that. And another thing with that is, like, don't worry about what other photographers are charging and what other photographers are doing. I find getting caught up in the comparison game when you're first beginning is so easy. Figure out your cost of doing business, and that includes your time. So figure out how long, so say you're trying to price out a 1-hour session. Figure out how long that takes you, because it doesn't just take the 1-hour session. How long does it take to drive there? How much gas does it take to drive there? How much gas does it take to drive back? How much editing time does that take? Like, sit down and audit how long it takes you to edit photos from a 1-hour session on average, and things like that. So time is a really big thing to factor into that too, how much time you're spending on stuff. And then you can kind of figure out how much you want to make per hour. In my eyes, it's more valuable to get more word of mouth, more reviews, more experience in the very beginning than worrying about, I need $500 or I need, you know, whatever per shoot. Okay, this one was kind of funny. Somebody put in the question box, on my story, how the fuck do you blog? This one is not one that I'm super good at. I'm not super good at consistently blogging. It's something I want to get better at. It's something I feel like is super, super important. Definitely not as like a beginner, like it's definitely not one of the top priorities you should have, but it's something that can greatly help you in your business in multiple ways. So the number one way that I lately have liked to use blogging is for sharing more from one session. I will create a blog post with like 20 plus images, not the whole thing sometimes maybe, but it just gives you a place to showcase more than a handful of images from one session so that clients that are booking you can go through and get a feel for what an entire session looks like rather than like what one image from a session looks like. So it'll show kind of the variety that you get in a final gallery, or you know, the different kind of areas that you shoot or the different poses you do. The biggest one for me as a boudoir photographer, and I'm sure it would apply with couples photographers, family photographers, branding photographers, whatever it is giving advice to your clients or helpful resources for your clients, whether that be what the experience looks like for you. Like I have a blog post that runs over the entire experience with me from the moment you inquire to the moment your products are sitting in your hands. And it gives everyone a breakdown of how that's gonna go, because that'll really help people that like to know what they're going into before they get into it. Another good one would be for like couples, you could do like outfit advice, or for branding, you could also do outfit advice or talking about how to bring your brand colors into your branding session, or you could talk about why a branding session is so important. Share your expertise with your clients, because then they're gonna read that and they're gonna be like, damn, they know what they're talking about, I should book with them. And then it also doubles as something that you can send your clients to, like when they book with you, as resources to help them make the most out of their session. The next topic that was requested that I cover is social media management. I love creating content and planning social media content. The biggest game changer for me was getting Later. And Later is a scheduling app. So you can essentially, so what I do is I go in and I usually will schedule, like, I like to do a month. Lately I haven't been good sitting down because there's been so much going on, but in an ideal world, I sit down, I take a couple hours and I plan a month's worth of Instagram posts, like feed posts at one time. And then I don't have to think about it. I'm staying consistent with posting, which is huge. The posts go up for you. It's worked great for me because then I can be shooting or I can be doing whatever and I get a notification, it's like an Instagram post went up on your feed and I'm like, how perfect. I didn't have to do anything and it helps keep me consistent. It's the best thing ever. You can also schedule Instagram stories through Later. I haven't really done much with that. You can also schedule Facebook posts, Twitter posts, and I believe Pinterest as well. Don't quote me on that. I will put the link to go and sign up for Later down below. Next, how to master manual mode. Like I said, I think I want to do a whole video on this. There's three main things that you need to know with manual mode. ISO, which is your camera's sensitivity to light. So the higher your ISO is, the more grain you're gonna see in your images, but the more sensitive your camera is gonna be to light, i.e. if you're in a super dark environment, you're gonna wanna bump up your ISO, but just know that with bumping up your ISO comes more grain. Next is your f-stop or your aperture, which is the size of the opening in the lens. The higher the number, the more is in focus. f/22, for example, is great for something like landscapes where you want everything in focus, where you want nothing kind of blurred, as you would say. So when you are on f/22, the whole of your lens is smaller. More is in focus, but that means less light is coming into your camera, so you're going to need to account for that, whether by bumping up your ISO or slowing down your shutter speed. Smaller hole, less light, more in focus. Let's go down to f/1.2. So that's a way bigger hole. You're letting in way more light, but there's less in focus. So f/1.2 to like 2.8 is really popular for portraits, because then you want that nice blurred background that's gonna give you a great depth of field, which is just a fancy photography term for like that blur that you see. Bigger hole, more light, less in focus. f/22, smaller hole, less light, more in focus. So knowing those things and how to account for those changes is huge, and you can do that a few ways. Like I said, you can account for those changes by bumping up or down your ISO or bumping up or down your shutter speed. Say you want to shoot with a low depth of field, so f/1.2, so that's a bigger opening, so you're gonna have more light. So the way I would adjust for that is I would speed up my shutter speed. So that's the third component of shooting in manual, is your shutter speed, which is how fast your camera is like closing when it takes a picture, essentially, or how fast it's firing. So if you have a lower number, it's gonna be open, the hole is gonna be open for, the aperture is gonna be open for longer. So if you ever see those cool like infinity signs that people do with sparklers, those are really, really, really low shutter speeds. So essentially it's almost like recording a video, like it stays open for a couple seconds. So then when you're moving, it gets that trail of light, if that makes sense. And then the higher your shutter speed is, the less motion blur you're gonna have. So people that do like sports photography or trying to get candid pictures of people like running or moving, that kind of thing, you want a high shutter speed for that so that you're not gonna get any blur and everything's gonna be super sharp and crisp. Like I said, I think that's a whole video on its own, because I think that's like the foundation of being a good photographer, is knowing how to shoot in manual and knowing it like the back of your hand. So let me know down below if you want a video on that. Next is how to find poses for clients, how to learn posing for clients. And this kind of is a little bit different depending on what niche of photography you're in. I may or may not have a boudoir posing guide coming out soon-ish. I think posing guides are a great way to learn from other photographers their posing, and then you can kind of adapt what you like best and what fits your style the best, because you could buy 5 different posing guides from 5 different people and pull from each of them, and then you have your own little set of go-to poses. So I think that's a great way to do it. Apps like Unscripted, I think it's called, is a really good one for like couples and families and stuff like that. Looking on YouTube is another good one. If you type in like what kind of photography and like posing, there's a lot of behind the scenes type stuff. So you can check that out as well. And like I said, I do have a boudoir posing guide coming so soon. Life has been hectic these last couple months, so it's taking me a little longer to get it done than I want to, but I do have that coming soon. I will add the link to my photographer's email list down below, and you can join that to find out when I release it. So these two kind of go hand in hand. How do you find your style and how do you achieve warm and moody tones? So I shoot very dark, warm, moody. That's just my style. It took me a long time to find my style, and it's still, even as a photographer, and I'm sure any other photographer who's been doing this for years will tell you, it's once you find your style, it stays a little bit more consistent, but it's always kind of evolving and changing, and not drastically, but a little bit. But it did take me a really long time to find my style, and it's just something that comes through trial and error. I used to use a lot of different presets when I was first starting out. Now I will preface with presets and say, be careful and lower your expectations when it comes to buying presets, because you have to keep in mind that the images that they're using to show you what the presets look like were taken with a certain light and certain settings. Preset's gonna look completely different. And if you're a beginner and you don't know how to tweak those presets to make them, to like achieve the look that you want, it's gonna be very frustrating. So just save yourself a lot of headache and a lot of money. And if you're gonna buy presets, buy them from a photographer that made them, like a professional photographer. But also, presets are good because then you learn to tweak something to make it what you are kind of after. And don't get me wrong, it's a very frustrating process and takes a long time to find your style, and it's always evolving, but just keep practicing. In terms of shooting warm and moody, a really big thing that I find beginner photographers don't know about or don't necessarily take advantage of within Lightroom, the HSL sliders, which is the hue, saturation, luminance sliders. So if you go down into Lightroom, into the color panel, there is like a panel for red, a panel for blue, green, whatever. And playing with the hue of the colors is huge. And again, there's no specific setting because it's gonna depend on what the color of the room you're shooting is in, what time of day, that kind of thing. But play with those HSL sliders, not just the white balance of the photo, so the coolness or the warmness of the photo. I feel like a lot of people make the mistake there and they just try to slide it to the warm side and think that that's gonna give you a warm and moody edit, and it's not. Split toning is another one, which is essentially the color of the highlights and the shadows in your images, and that can make a huge difference. So play around with those, and it's going to take, again, a lot of playing around and a lot of tweaking and a lot of experimenting, but once you learn to kind of master those specific sections in Lightroom and play around with them more, you're gonna get more comfortable. How to keep your white balance consistent in different lighting situations, etc. The answer for me is I don't. I shoot with auto white balance. I know some photographers use Kelvin to shoot and they pick like their specific Kelvin, and if you're not aware, Kelvin is just like the temperature of the light, and you can choose to set it towards a warmer or a cooler tone, but I don't know. I can't really speak on using Kelvin to shoot because I have never done it. I have always shot auto white balance and that has worked great for me. But I'll link a video explaining on how to shoot with like to pick your Kelvin down below, and you can check that video out. How do you organize invoices, contracts, emails, back end stuff? Here's what you need to know. Here's my holy grail. HoneyBook. Get HoneyBook. It is a client management software. I do all my contracts in there. I do all my invoices in there. If people want to pay credit card, that's what I take it through. It organizes all the emails, so then it's not just like a kerfuffle in my inbox. It's each person has their own thread. So all of our emails back and forth is in one folder. The contract is in the folder. You can do questionnaires through there. I do my scheduling through there. What else can you do? There's so many features that I don't even use. Like there's a tasks thing. There is an expenses like section, but I don't love it. So for my expenses personally, I print out all my receipts, and then I use a Pages document or Excel if you have a PC, and I input everything, and then it kind of adds it all up. And so I take more so my gross numbers from HoneyBook, and then I have all my expenses printed out, and then I do a spreadsheet each month with my expenses. And then when it's tax time, I only have to hand in 12 spreadsheets, and it's super easy. HoneyBook is really nice because you can see like how much you've made in a month, or how much you've made between this date and this date, or how much you did for the whole year, and it shows you if you were doing better or worse than last month. And HoneyBook is the best thing ever. I'll put the link down below. You can get a free 7-day trial, and then I think it's like, I don't know, it's some sort of money saving something. So I'll link that down below. Try it out. It is amazing. Life-changing. I will never go back to not using HoneyBook. My next topic that I got requested to cover was newsfeed aesthetic, or like feed aesthetic. And this is one that I think has been kind of phasing out in the last couple of years. Like the aesthetic of your feed in terms of what pictures look good where, I don't pay much attention to. Like my feed on Instagram looks very consistent because all my photos are very consistent in terms of like the tones in them. And that's the only thing that kind of makes my feed consistent. I don't sit there and like move the images around and be like, okay, this one looks better next to this one, and this one looks better next to this one. To me, personally, I think that's a waste of time. But that's just me. Some people will say otherwise, that having an aesthetically pleasing feed is everything. But to me, it's in 2021, 2022, I just don't think it's important. But you can use planning apps like in Later. You can drag stuff around to kind of mess with that if you want to. Or I think Unum or whatever is free, and you can kind of just plan it. I don't know if it does the posting for you, but you can kind of preview it that way. Like, yes, I think your style in terms of editing should be consistent so people know what they're getting, but I don't think it matters if, you know, this image looks good between these two or between these two. Like, I just don't think it matters personally. And then the last one I got asked to talk about was editing. What I use Lightroom and Photoshop for removing things. Usually if I use the like spot removal tool in Lightroom, but it's not the greatest, so I use it for small things. If I need to do anything big or major, I go into Photoshop and remove things. And other than that, I use Lightroom for everything. I use my own presets, which again took me years to develop, but I'm finally at a place where I don't want to pull my hair out when I open Lightroom, which is a very satisfying feeling. But if you are feeling like you want to pull your hair out every time you open Lightroom, you are not alone. I was that way for years, and I'm sure every other photographer starting out felt the same way. It's just, you gotta trust the process. So that is it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate everyone who asked questions. Like I said, I will pop my Instagram up here. Follow me there. I post when I'm doing different kind of YouTube videos that you can contribute to. Assuming this goes up before the 25th of October, which I think it will, I am doing a spooky boudoir shoot, and I am filming an entire behind the scenes. You guys really loved my last behind the scenes boudoir shoot that I did. So I'm so excited to be bringing Mary and Peyton back, who were both in that video, and we are doing a spooky Halloween shoot, which I am so excited for. I will link the last video down below as well so that you can check it out, and I'll pop it up in a card as well. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you hit that subscribe button before you leave. Give this video a thumbs up, and make sure to follow me over on Instagram, and I will see you guys in the next one.